The bright side of addiction is recovery. And recovery is its own best reward. If you're new to our podcast, we welcome you. If you have been here before, welcome back. Now, if you're in recovery or know or love someone who is, or maybe you simply want to know a little bit more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone that you know or love who is harmfully using alcohol or any other drug, this is the podcast for you as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder, you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Recent episodes have featured an historic interview with former First Lady Betty Ford, singer-songwriter Judy Collins, Broadway legend Ben Vereen, and sportscaster and TV host Pat O'Brien. You'll find all of these and more, as well as conversations with everyday people in long-term recovery, sharing their story, their insight, their path. Now, in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we're going to visit with Karen Morgan. She is the director of Grace House. I love that name. A marvelous program for women down in Memphis, Tennessee. She is in long-term recovery and is one half of a couple in recovery. Here's a quick clip from my conversation with Karen Morgan.
I started reading the big book. I was terrified that I would see myself in those pages. What's interesting is that that's what gave me hope. Recovery today means that I have an opportunity to help others. I have an opportunity to help the person in front of me, whether they're seeking recovery or their loved one is seeking recovery, or at a public policy level, being able to help people understand what is needed for this population and what needs to be done and what policies need to change so that we can break this stigma and help more people and lose less people.
My conversation with Karen will be coming up in a matter of minutes. And we will also conclude our podcast today with some wonderful words of wisdom from a beloved actor and a person who treasured his long-term recovery, Lou Gossett Jr. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org, and if you would like to help us out financially, we'd certainly appreciate it, or know of a foundation that may be interested, or maybe a business in underwriting our program, we would be ever so grateful. A reminder, our email address, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. And we would love to hear from you. Before we continue, I want to remind listeners that September is National Recovery Month, with an incredible number of events and activities in every single state. Check out what's happening where you live and participate in the community of recovery. You can find all the information about National Recovery Month at facesandvoicesofrecovery.org, a great inclusive organization. And you'll also find a lot of information at the government SAMHSA site. That's www.samhsa.gov/recovery-month. Again, www.samhsa.gov/recovery-month. September is a great time for all of us to stand up and celebrate recovery. By the way, I will be down in Texas this month, National Recovery Month, speaking at the 50th Annual Conference of TAP. That's the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. I'll be broadcasting interviews with speakers and attendees for Recovery Coast to Coast, which you will hear on future episodes of Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. Now, if you would like me to come speak at your addiction conference or recovery community event, please get in touch with me directly at Neil Scott, NEILSCOTT, at iHeartMedia.com, or at Neil Scott Seattle at Comcast.net. I have a number of talks that I do, including The Power of Recovery, also Recovery Resiliency, and a vast collection of stories about the alcoholism movement over the last 50 years and a number of the people that I got to know personally throughout my time in the field. I'd love to share some stories with you, as well as record an episode of Recovery Coast to Coast from your event. Again, Neil Scott at iHeartMedia.com or Neil Scott Seattle at Comcast.net. Recovery Coast to Coast, supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of America's oldest, least expensive, and most successful treatment programs. In fact, they are listed in the Newsweek recently released 2024 list of America's top treatment providers. You know, many people know of their stellar reputation as one of the best in the country in the treatment of adults, but they also have a highly successful adolescent program. It utilizes a multidisciplinary team of certified counselors and medical professionals who are fully committed to the highest quality of adolescent treatment at the most affordable price. They are well-trained and deeply caring, experienced professionals. Sundown's adolescent program is gender-specific, with every individual supported by a team of professionals, and that includes medical, educational, psychological, and recreational specialists. Living arrangements are also gender-specific, with separate wings for males and females. All patient rooms have an outside view, beautiful twin beds, full bath, shower. You can take a look-see at sundown.org/gallery. Sundown M Ranch is in network with most insurance plans, and you can quickly obtain a quote for the patient by giving them a call at 1-800-326-7444. Medicaid availability is limited, so call to begin the process. Check out their website for more information and take a look-see at the facility, which is not far from Seattle. It's gorgeous. They own their own land, 30 acres at the mouth of the Yakima River Canyon. Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. Yeah, it's coffee time as I make my pour, and I'd like you to meet Karen Morgan while I drink my coffee, and hopefully you enjoy your beverage as well. I met Karen at the NAATP conference in Denver. That's the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. And she absolutely overflowed with grace and gratitude. And she just happens to run a program called Grace House. Now, she was exposed to the 12-step community by her mom and her stepdad, but they didn't keep her from nearly destroying her own life as a result of her addiction. She finally got sober, stayed sober for 13 years, then decided to do a little more research, and eventually found her way back into the program. Shame kept her out, gratitude brought her back, and kept her in long-term recovery. Here now is my chat with Karen Morgan. Welcome back once again to Recovery Coast to Coast, the only program in America talking about addiction and recovery, and we've been doing it for the last 20 years. We're right now in Denver, Colorado. We've taken the program on the road for the 45th annual conference for NAATP, the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. And joining us in this segment is Karen Morgan. She is the Executive Director of Grace House. I love that name, Grace House in Memphis. It's a program for women, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about Karen and how she's come into the program and what's happening in her life as well. Karen, welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Tell me, you said that you've been around a couple of times.
I have,
Yep.
actually, yes. I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous when my mom married my stepdad. They've been married now for 52 years, and he had a couple of years sobriety, and that was in
My
71
goodness.
was when my parents married.
Oh, tell me about your background as far as the drinking and using.
Oh, wow, yeah. I
Were
started
you out of
using-
control?
Pretty much, yeah.
Karen
and it
was
didn't
out of
take
control.
long. It did
Yeah.
not take long. Yeah, I probably started really using around 14,
Yeah.
and I hit bottom at 19 after
That's
a
pretty
pretty
quick.
significant car wreck.
Oh.
Yeah, I broke my left hip and pelvis. They weren't sure I'd ever walk again. That
You wouldn't happen
kinda
to have
got
been
my
drinking
attention.
at that time.
Yeah, actually I was. All these years later, I was in a blackout at the time, so I cannot tell you exactly what happened.
Wow. Did that precipitate your going into the rooms or in?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I was in the hospital in bed and in traction for like a couple of months.
Oh.
and my dad had already been in the program, and I'd been around the program since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So
Yeah, you
and
knew what was coming.
I did, but he was great. He just brought me some literature, and he said, I'm just gonna leave this over here,
Nice.
And when I got bored and there was nothing on television to watch, television's not like now the way it was then, and I started reading the big book. I was terrified that I would see myself in those pages. What's interesting is that that's what gave me hope.
Wow.
I'm not the only one.
Do you remember your first meeting?
I do.
Tell me about it.
Well, it was kind of small. It was in a Baptist church in Bartlett, Tennessee. There was maybe 15 people there, and my dad took me, and I was on crutches, and I just remember feeling very uneasy. But it was the second meeting. They say, go to your first, but come back to the second.
Yeah.
And I did, and that's where things really started to change for me. I actually met my husband there. He did not 13 step me.
I was just going to
have to say that.
Okay. Disclaimer.
Right. We actually were just friends. He had no designs on anything romantic. It just kind of evolved that way, and rather quickly as well. That was in August of 6. My parents were set to move out here to Colorado, actually, shortly thereafter. So he figured he better hurry up and propose. And so we started dating in, this was August, September, probably somewhere around September, October. He proposed to me in November, and we were married in December.
Wow.
And then we are still married.
No kidding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's it like being a couple in recovery?
Well, it's been incredible. It's been very helpful, and at the same time, not so much, because I also entered the addiction field, and that was a little difficult for him because he thought that it was all psychological mumbo jumbo, and so I had to educate him while I was getting educated.
Wow.
But he eventually opened his eyes and actually did some recovery coach work in some treatment facilities.
Wow.
Sure did.
And what happened? You had a relapse along the way.
I did have a relapse. I sure did.
How
and
long
he
did
stayed
you have
sober.
In the program when it happened?
I had 13 years. I stopped working in the field. I wasn't going to meetings. You know how it happens, right?
Absolutely.
Didn't have anybody to be accountable to,
right.
and had just enough knowledge about the disease of addiction to be dangerous, mainly to myself. So I convinced myself that I really wasn't an alcoholic. I was too young, right? That probably I just had a personality disorder. And what do you do with a personality disorder? Well, you drink, of course.
Yes.
That didn't work out so well.
How long were you out?
I was in and out for a couple of years.
Wow.
The shame was the worst. It kept me out for a long time. And finally, I did get sober again, and this time I went to treatment. Because my husband told me I was going to treatment. He didn't give me an ultimatum. He likes to say it was an ultimatum. I never heard either or. I heard you're going. That's it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure how I know all of this stuff. What is this going to do for me? God saw fit to put people in my life that I could really identify with, who's told my story. And I thought, oh my gosh, if this woman could get sober, surely to goodness I can. And I have, and it's now been 22 years.
Wow, that's amazing. What does recovery mean to you today?
Recovery today means that I have an opportunity to help others. I have opportunity to help the person in front of me, whether they're seeking recovery or their loved one is seeking recovery, or at a public policy level, being able to help people understand what is needed for this population and what needs to be done and what policies need to change so that we can break this stigma and help more people and lose less people.
Yeah. You're executive director of Grace House. Tell me about Grace House and who they serve.
So we work primarily with women 18 and up that have a primary diagnosis of substance use disorder.
This is down in Memphis?
In Memphis, Tennessee, yes, in the heart of Midtown. We've been there for 47 years. We have a primary treatment program that they're there for anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And we never turn any woman away for her inability to pay.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm so grateful
God bless you.
to be able to do that. And that's in large part due to the state of Tennessee, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
Wow. You've seen a lot of miracles.
I have. I have. I am one,
You
and,
are
and
one?
I get to watch them happen before
Oh,
my eyes. It's the most
how
incredible thing.
thrilling. Yeah. What do you say to women who are now in a place where you once were?
I say there is hope, and know that it doesn't make you any less of a woman or any weaker of a person to ask for help,
Mm,
because not only will you get the help that you ask for, but you'll also be helping the people you ask to help you, and that's the cool thing.
absolutely. Well, I thank you for recovering out loud.
Absolutely.
Okay, Karen, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Karen. She's the director of Grace House. And if you want to find out more about Grace House, visit gracehouseofmemphis, one word, .org. By the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast, if you would like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path that you've chosen, and as long as you have been in continuous recovery for a year or more, drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast at comcast.net. Now, coming up next, some recovery insight from award-winning actor Lou Gossett Jr. That's in just 30 seconds.
Alcohol is running your life. You want help, but can't take time away from work to get it. Where do you turn? Contact Sundown M Ranch. Sundown M Ranch outpatient programs have helped thousands recover from addiction without losing time on the job. Nationally recognized for innovative, effective, and affordable treatment programs, Sundown M Ranch will help you put your life back on track. Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
Now, as promised, some inspirational thoughts from a wonderful, wonderful actor in long-term recovery, Lou Gossett Jr.
We couldn't understand why our relationships were so disappointing. Why did people treat us the way they did? Why did they pull back when we made it clear we needed them? What was the matter with everyone? We didn't see it then, but we certainly realize now that our extreme self-centeredness was at the root of our difficulties with other people. We almost always thought of ourselves first. We talked about ourselves incessantly. We focused on what others could and should do for us. We insisted on having our own way, no matter what the situation or circumstance. Our relationships could withstand only so much of that kind of behavior before they deteriorated and fell apart. When we broke out of the shell of self-centeredness, our relationships began to improve immeasurably. We learned to listen to others. We considered their feelings and not just our own. We compromised. We became willing to overlook the minor things and concentrated instead on what was best for the relationship. For the first time in our lives, we became sincerely concerned with the wants and needs of others. Thought for today: when I become less self-centered, that's when my relationships will improve.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please share it with at least one other person. I'd sure appreciate it. And if you'd like to get in touch, our email is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. And if you're considering treatment for a friend or a loved one, be sure and visit NAATP.org/AID. You'll find a list of treatment programs that adhere to the strict ethical guidelines that are essential in terms of medical treatment. One of them is Sundown M Ranch, but there are 1,000 other good treatment programs as well. And remember, if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, there is a 24-hour national helpline offering free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. That phone number, 1-800-622-HELP. And we encourage you to check out findsupport.gov. Brand new website designed for individuals, families, and friends. Lots of information, including how to pay for treatment, including low-cost and free treatment options. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. Another shout out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is indeed recovery. Pass it on.